um, today. The session will last an hour, and I'm going to try and stick to that as best as we can. And so I will be prompting speakers to wind up if things are overrunning a little bit. Throughout the session today, I really would be very grateful if everyone who's watching and listening could submit questions. There's a sort of a questions function box on the screen somewhere. If you just write your questions in there, then at the end of the 3 presentations, we're going to have a sort of a brief discussion, and we can put some of those questions to the presenters and have a bit of a chat about some of those issues. So without further ado, the first presenter is I'm delighted to introduce Helen Quigley. Helen Quigley is Chief Executive of the Inner City Trust Group. She's a member of Development Trust NI, the Academy of Urbanism, and the governing body of the University of Ulster, among many other roles. Helen's a fellow of the Institute of Accounting Technicians and worked in accountancy for 30 years. And she's also a former councillor and mayor of Derry. So Helen, you're very welcome, and I'm going to pass it over to you now.
Thank you, Angus, and good morning, delegates. Thank you for asking me to speak at your conference, and I will speak briefly about the pre-COVID decline that was already existing, the effects of COVID, and what I believe is required in a post-pandemic city, and hopefully give you the benefit of some of our experience. Delegates, for quite some time, our city centres have been undergoing significant and ongoing pressures, and these pressures have been building for a number of years. And now COVID has exacerbated them, and I will come back to this later. You don't need me to rehearse all of the pre-COVID pressures, but it's worth talking briefly on a couple of them. The online shopping, effectively our high street retailers have been competing with themselves for upwards of 20 years now. And out-of-town shopping has been very controversial, although it is consumer-led, and many consumers like to go to out-of-town to shop, not least because they can do quite substantial shopping in several different outlets, and also they can park freely and quite easily. All of these feed into the ongoing decline, and we only have to look at the fixed overheads of rent and rates and see the dropouts that have happened over the last 10 years in particular, where the squeeze come on rents, properties became vacant and landlords had their returns squeezed, and they moved then to put in a number of charity shops. And we've also seen the increase of pound shops across our cities as well. I suppose we in the Trust put in place a 5-year investment plan, and we moved to diversify the footfall, recognising that there was a problem a number of years ago. We invested in hospitality and tourism products. In particular, we introduced the first boutique hotel inside our walled city. We took a much longer view, and we put patient capital into this particular project. Now we have bore the fruits of that. It's now an award-winning hotel. It has enhanced the streetscape, and it has also enhanced the tourism product. We also at the same time invested in a number of niche shops, and we brought together a number of artist collectives. And not so many months ago, we had over 120 artists collectively retailing out of 3 shops within our own Craft Village complex. And we also put in place a number of skills and education based centres. Along with that physical development that took place, we put a programme of events in place to run throughout the entire year. In simple terms, our aim was to simply revitalise the city centre and to help with the daytime and the nighttime economy. This strategy was working, and then along came COVID. Nothing or nobody, I don't believe, could have prepared us for the lockdown and its consequences. And there was nothing really that we could do to mitigate against it. However, the effect of COVID has accelerated and intensified the decline in our city centres. It now challenges us to examine our traditional view of city centres, their uses and indeed their purpose, and even their survival. As you can see from this slide, there were already a number of pressures, and these have further exerted again on the high street. So the virus, in fact, has created unprecedented levels of uncertainty right across the board. No one knows what the future holds, and people are particularly concerned about future lockdowns. How will they look? Will it be regions? Will they be localised? Will it be sector by sector? People are concerned about job retention beyond furlough, which ends next week, and others are concerned about the return of sustainable level of tourism and when that is likely to come back. We're getting various opinions from various commentators. Some people are talking about 12 to 18 months, others are talking about a 3 to 5 year slow recovery. And then we have concerns, particularly in my portfolio, about the ability of small businesses to survive through this pandemic. And of course, our major concern is about the health and well-being of all of our citizens and how that impacts in all the actions that we actually take and do to mitigate against potential negative outcomes. But from my perspective, what we did here in the Trust when the lockdown came, we moved very, very quickly to relieve the pressure on our tenant base, especially those in the hospitality and tourism sector alongside our small retailers. We moved first of all to give them a rent-free period for 1 month, which extended over the 4-month period. We then moved to carry out essential health and safety issues and to address those. And we put in place an essential maintenance programme. Alongside that, we appraised and signposted all of our tenants to all the public health advice and also to the support schemes and any benefits. And we also moved to assist them in this area. There's no doubt in my mind, if we had not have taken the actions that we did, we would not have seen the return of the number of tenants that we did get back again. And I suppose it's fair to say that we were in a strong position, having a balanced property portfolio that allows us to lean in to some sectors when necessary. And on this occasion, it worked quite well for us. Going forward, however, I firmly believe that we need to comprehensively reimagine our city centres and what they will look like and what they will consist of. This won't be done in a short time, and we need to take the longer view going forward. We need to begin the process that transitions our city centres from where we are to where we need to get to. We also need to stop the decline and build a much more sustainable model going forward. For me, I believe the keys to success will be flexibility, innovation, and greater collaboration across all sectors, including government. The flexibility that we will require, I believe, especially around work patterns. We can see and hear currently, and it's been reported on practically on a daily basis, that we have big office blocks throughout many towns and cities that are sitting with less than 20% of the workforce in them. We hear the big corporates saying there'll be no return to the pre-COVID situation. And I think that's a bit of short-termism. It's more about economic evaluation for those corporates. And we need to balance out with the needs of our employees and their health and well-being. It works for some to stay at home, particularly those over 40, 50 years of age, but it doesn't work for the younger generation, particularly those with young children. So I think we will see new covenants coming between employers and trade unions in the not too distant future. And I think we are possibly looking at 2 or 3 shifts per day, and yes, even in office accommodation. This in turn will necessitate the small business to evaluate their delivery method and service. We can hear, particularly here in Northern Ireland, where we have a lot of public service servants working in the centre of Belfast, and our small traders are calling for them to come back into the office so that they can support them. Of particular interest to this audience will be the innovation and change required in public policy and in the use of buildings to facilitate the transition to these new arrangements. One of the areas of concern will be to reimagine these buildings to avoid large, whole-scale empty office blocks and possibly sitting alongside vacant retail units. My guess is that these will become much more mixed use to include living accommodation in our city centres in particular, probably more scaled down office, pod-like accommodation. I think we're going to see a greater mix of culture, arts and leisure. And I believe that some shopping centres have already begun to diversify, having installed cinemas, bowling alleys and other leisure outlets. And they've wrapped those around with eating houses so that mum or dad can happily go along and do their shopping while one or other of the parents entertain the children, and then perhaps they can have lunch and a bite to eat together. I think it's fair to say that one size won't fit all, and each town and city will have to do their own assessment need. It's also important that as a paradigm of business and city centres shift, then public policy and funding mechanisms need to shift to facilitate change in the most innovative and responsive way. And I think we're starting to see some of that coming through. As I said, I believe we will need more flexibility across many areas, and in particular for planners looking at street trading, opening hours, new covered mall-like street areas to create more outdoor space to allow for social distancing. I think we're going to have to look at reviewing parking arrangements, looking at our pedestrian zones and how can we align those with the public realm. We need to look at having much more user family friendly areas. I think we need to improve walkability, certainly in the city. And we need to introduce cycle lanes, and I think we've seen some of those, but we could be doing with more. I also believe that we need to improve our public transport arrangements, and that these need to be much more cost effective. As I said earlier, the financing and development and the facilitation of the transition to a new paradigm will require a new model of capital investment to include, in my view, patient capital. I think we all need to take the longer view. We don't need cheap and cheerful. What we need to do is build a sustainable model going forward. I think we also need to learn the art of co-investing with others. And we were blessed when we were doing the Bishopsgate Hotel to receive some grant aid from both the North West Development Office and from the Heritage Lottery Fund. That accumulated to 18% of the overall cost, but it certainly allowed us to go ahead with that development, knowing that we wouldn't get any quick return from it. That acted as a regeneration project at the top of the city, which had been dormant for some 30 years, mainly due to the Troubles. And we've seen the effect of that. There's almost 100 people working up there. It certainly has enhanced the streetscape, and it has enhanced the tourism product, as well as bringing life and vitality back into the city centre and giving confidence to others to invest in that area.
Helen, 1 minute warning.
Okay, thank you. And of course, dare I say, the creation of a new rating policy and a look at other possible financial instruments. To conclude, let me be absolutely clear. There is no certainty in what the post-pandemic city centre will look like. The possibilities of recovery will be greatly diminished if we refuse to develop innovative actions and embrace the change that has arrived. However, if we are flexible and understand that the old ways will no longer suffice, then we can be the shapers of the new paradigm and ensure that our city centres will have a safe and more sustainable future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Helen. That was really interesting and really stimulating presentation. Really good. And can I just remind everybody, please, you know, as we're going along, if questions and queries and so on come to mind, please put them down in the question and answer slot, and we'll be coming back to those at the end. So we're now going to move on, and I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who is Marie Ward, who was recently appointed as Chief Executive to Newry, Mourne and Down District Council, and actually is the first woman to hold this position in the history of that council. Prior to this new role, Marie held the position of Director of Enterprise, Regeneration and Tourism, and was responsible for building control and planning, including development management and local development plans. So really good experience in terms of today's conference. Marie was responsible for the project management of the Down District Council's £11 million administrative building in Downpatrick and the development of the Downshire Public Sector campus. So she's had a really interesting and varied career, and really looking forward to hearing her presentation today about the role of town centres in recovery. So over to you, Marie, and thank you.
Okay, thank you, Angus, and hopefully everybody can hear me. Just thank you to everybody for the invite this morning, and thank you, Angus, for the warm introduction. I think it's fair to say that the last 7 months have been the most challenging that we will all have faced on a professional and even on a personal level. The challenge of a global pandemic isn't one that we ever imagined, and I have no doubt it will have changed how we work and indeed how we're going to live forever. I like to think that from every challenge comes an opportunity. So this morning I am going to reflect a wee bit on the Newry, Mourne and Down region, the impact of COVID on our district, reinventing our town centres and our Newry regeneration plans in particular, and then what I consider to be critical success factors for the role of town centres in recovery. So Newry, Mourne and Down is a very diverse region with over 100 miles of coastline and 3 areas of outstanding natural beauty. And I suppose to give a wee bit of a consideration to our geography, we extend from Crossmaglen, which is 61 miles north of Dublin, to Ballynahinch, 17 miles from Belfast. We are really what we consider to be placed in the perfect location between 2 cities of Belfast and Dublin. Just on that slide, you'll see some of our key towns and villages. The Newry, pre-COVID as a council, we had in place major regeneration plans for Newry City and Downpatrick, and then smaller regeneration plans across our rural villages. I think it's important to say that these plans continue, and I would suggest are even more critical in the COVID world. Pre-COVID, as I said, in 2015, Newry, Mourne and Down Council had a very ambitious investment strategy, and it was very much about capitalising on the assets of the area, primarily our location and our people. There has been real drive for investment, and we're one of the key partners in the Belfast Region City Deal. And what we hope to deliver through the Belfast Region City Deal as partners is key infrastructure projects, including things like the Southern Relief Road, which will open up the area from a transport perspective. We also are looking at the Newry regeneration projects, which is very much an all-encompassing regeneration scheme, and I'll reflect on that shortly. We also have the Gateway to the Mournes, reflecting our tourism offering, and then there's consideration as well to the fishing and agriculture and rural development within our area. And at the core of all of this is the health and well-being of our district. COVID has had a huge impact on the district and on the people of the district. And I'm just going to take a minute, and I'm hoping the technology is going to work for me. There's a wee 5-minute video I want to show you, which was one that we filmed during lockdown on the weekend of the 11th to the 13th of April, which was actually the bank holiday Easter weekend, where the district should have been absolutely buzzing. So I'm hoping, Adam, you're able to play that video for me now. Thank you, Adam. So that video and that film, as I said, taken over what should have been probably one of the busiest weekends in the district, is quite stark in the emptiness of our city, towns and villages. And for me, what it does is it reinforces the fact that people are what keep places alive and our economy moving. Historically, the High Street would have performed as a place, and you only have to look back through the history books to see that they were very much a social and commercial hub where people would meet, run errands, make use of local shops and services. But in recent years, I think people no longer see your high street as a commercial or social destination, but it's really kind of a place of movement. I'm guilty of it myself. We look to just drive in, drive back out again and not engage with the people within it. I think the space that was created by lockdown has shown that there are opportunities to re-engage the space in our town centres and to utilise it to make sure that people feel safe and enjoy their time locally. And now, I believe more than ever, is the opportunity to reinvent our villages, our town centres and our city centres, and to make people feel welcome and comfortable and safe, not just when they're in the shops, but outside on the pavement as well. I think it's also important to reflect, does the high street need to live or die by its retail offering? And I would suggest not. There has been a move in recent years towards creating that more leisure and social focus within the high street, a move towards restaurants and cafes. If I look at Newcastle as a town centre, it's absolutely buzzing. The amount of coffee shops, small takeaway bakeries, places where people can go and socialise and I suppose take 5 minutes or 10 minutes with their friends and family and just enjoy themselves. So it is a model, I suppose, that we can bring right across our cities and town centres. And I think we can learn from the past as well and look at the strengths of what was before and why that was the case. So in taking advantage of that, if I reflect on the Newry regeneration plan, so back in 2015 as a council, we had agreed to develop a new civic centre, new offices for council. But we said that would be something that we should use as a leverage to stimulate investment. And from that has grown a major regeneration plan for Newry City Centre itself, which includes a new theatre conference space, new office space, environmental improvement scheme, a park, additional office accommodation, residential accommodation, a new health hub, and as I said earlier, the Southern Relief Road. So you could say, do we keep doing these things or do we stop because of COVID and how things have changed? And I think the answer is we have to keep doing and we have to keep delivering. But in doing that, we need to make sure that what we're delivering meets this new or the world of COVID. So from that perspective, we ourselves have paused in particular to look at things like office accommodation and what way that should operate. And I suppose that's very much about getting people back into the city centre. So moving from I suppose the office space of traditional office space, but more towards collaboration space. And for us in Newry and Newry, Mourne and Down, I think there's actually an opportunity that we can grab as people re-engage locally, work more from home locally and use their local high street to engage through coffee shops, bakeries, the local butchers, and we need to take that opportunity ourselves. I've said infrastructure is important, but I think it's important also to reflect on when we look at the video with the emptiness of the streets, there is a huge degree of space there, and what we need ourselves is to look at how we utilise that space. There has been a move towards, I suppose, that cycling and walking and re-engaging in a different way. We do need to look at policy in government and see how we can ensure that our public transport system is one that works for the people of the local area and local communities to make sure that they can engage with their town centres and city centres without having to use their own vehicles. So reduce traffic flow very much into our city and town centres. Something like the Southern Relief Road has been on the agenda long before COVID, but will be critical to move traffic away from the city centre itself. So what I'd say is Newry is a small city with a big vision, and we will be continuing to deliver on that and ensuring that we can, I suppose, bring people back into the heart of the city centre itself, because as I said the whole way through this presentation, it's people that make the economy and it's people that actually bring the area to life. So it's bringing them back into the heart of the city itself is key. So doing that, whether it be creating collaboration space, whether it be introducing new hotels, environmental improvement schemes, the reconnecting Newry, particularly to the water. We have an area which has a lot of open space, and that's what people are going to be looking for moving forward. So it's maximising the opportunities that come from that. For me, I think what is absolutely critical to our success factors moving forward is that we need to put people first and make sure that they feel safe and that they feel safe to come to the town and city and village centres to engage with people locally. We need to use the space that we have within those towns and villages and city centres. I think the video shows that from a distance. We have a lot of space allocated for roadways, we have a lot of space allocated for traffic movement and parking. We need to look at that and say how best can we bring that space back to people as opposed to vehicles. I think from a planning perspective, what that's going to mean is that we're going to need to be bold in our decision making, and we're going to have to be agile, and we're definitely going to have to be open to learning. But as I said at the start, I believe from every crisis comes an opportunity, and now I think is the opportunity to, I suppose, really get back to local and see how we can encourage our people to come back into the towns and city centres. It will require change, it will require investment, it will take time, but now is the time to do it. So thank you very much, Angus.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you very much. That was really interesting and actually quite a powerful video. I thought it just kind of really brings home to you where we have been and the real extent of the difficult time that everybody's been through. So thank you so much for that. Can I make a further plea to everybody to please put forward some questions? That would be much appreciated, and I will ask them of the panel at the end. I'll do so anonymously, so just to encourage you to ask the question. That would be great. Okay, so I'm now going to introduce our final speaker, Doody, who is the Integrated Cities and Planning Leader for Europe at Arup. And Lane's recent project work includes digital strategy and policy work for the Danish and Singaporean governments, the Greater London Authority, Dublin City Council, Sydney, Canberra, and major master planning projects in Singapore and Dubai. So really extensive and wide-ranging experience. Outside Arup, Lane is director of the board of the Sustainable Energy Agency of Ireland, and a national government agency for promoting sustainable energy practices and policies in Ireland. So, Lane, we're really delighted to have you here, and thank you so much for coming along. I'm really looking forward to hearing your presentation on post-pandemic future for town centres, a data and transport perspective. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Angus. And thank you very much to the previous speakers as well. Really interesting presentations that I hope to build on. Is my sound okay? Can you hear me all right? I hope so. Okay, you can let me know if not. So today I wanted to talk about some research that we've been doing at Arup around transport in particular, but sort of wider implications of how we move around and what the wider implications of this increasing working from home situation that we find ourselves in, that a lot of us find ourselves in. And then I'll talk a little bit about implications for cities and towns, and look particular focus on the sort of data and digital aspects of that. So at Arup we're doing lots of work on this, as you can imagine, and this is an early study that we've just done on looking at 3 cities, Dublin, Madrid and Milan, where we surveyed people. It was a survey where people could opt in to take the questionnaire, and we found that most people had changed their transport habits in some way, Many of them felt that their mobility would be reduced, that they would, that they would also keep their pre-COVID. Only 40% felt they would keep their pre-COVID mobility habits, and many of them were able to work from home. And this study, helped us to look at what the sort of immediate impacts of the COVID-19 induced lockdowns and induced working from home was telling us. And, I think one of the things it's telling us is that people are reluctant to get back on public transport, and they're reluctant to return to their pre-habits, that they do see some permanence in some of the changes that they're making. And this is borne out by other studies that we're doing, and also by other studies that we're seeing coming out. There's a lot of studies. I'm sure you'll have seen in the newspapers. There's almost an article every day about working from home and the impacts. But so another survey that we've been doing, which was of over 1,000 people in the UK, where we asked them about their intentions around working from home. And what we found is that very few people want to go back to a version of work where they're in the office 5 days a week. 50% would like to split their working equally between being at home and being in the office, and almost 30%, 28% didn't want to go back to the office at all. So I think that we are in for a very large change in how we work, but also in the economic geography of our cities. And although I think the good news is that most people do want to be in the office in some shape or form, but it's going to be a different type of being in the office, and it's going to be a different type of mobility and movement as well. So from this, we're seeing a few trends at the moment. I mean, the first trend is this working from home trend, which is fundamentally changing the economic geography of our cities, in that the sort of monolithic central business district, as Helen, I think, pointed out, is going to have to change and is going to have to be a lot more flexible. And so we see a need for more placemaking. So we're just about to release a study with IPUT, who are a large property fund in Dublin, around this, and the need for commercial property owners to take more responsibility for the spaces and the places that they're actually in, and to contribute more to those spaces. But I think, as Marie also identified, placemaking is going to be huge in terms of enticing people back into the office, and also making it a more productive experience for them. I think, again, as mentioned by the previous speakers, the people have a much greater appetite for being outdoors now, and that needs to be reflected in the spaces and places that they occupy. I think the second trend in terms of shopping from home, again, Helen identified this is something that's been a trend for 20 years now, but I think it's been absolutely accelerated by where we are now. And because shopping has become a lot about the experience of shopping, and at the moment shopping is not a very pleasant experience because there's queuing and there's masks and so on. So I think that in the opportunity, however, is to combine online platforms and physical space. And we've seen that before with a number of platforms. There was one called Pop to the Shops, which was a UK platform which allowed local shops and producers to aggregate, and the consumer orders their shopping, and then it all comes from these different shops, and then it's aggregated and delivered back to the consumer. And I think we'll see an increase in those kinds of platforms, and we've already seen a huge increase in online food ordering. So Just Eat and Deliveroo and these kinds of platforms are again, in some ways, being a lifeline for local restaurateurs and cafes, but in another way they have other implications in terms of space usage and labour laws and so on. So I think that's huge, and there's a lot to unpack there in terms of how we design shopping experiences going forward and how people choose to access shopping. The third one, learning from home, I won't dwell on too long. I mean, I think we're already seeing, luckily our children have gone back to school for the most part, but I think for third level students, they will be learning from home to a much greater extent. And I think that's something that will, again, because it's going to be going on for probably 6 to 12, maybe longer, that will become a more permanent trend in terms of blended learning. And then the fourth trend, living locally. Again, I think this has been picked up before, but I think, with the trend of working from home, and the lockdown has shown this, lots of studies have shown that people have a much greater appreciation of their local area, which does present potentially opportunities for the high street in terms of a diversified offering, in terms of shopping, but also perhaps opportunities to work on the high street, to have, there's also a lot of talk about new models for corporations, maybe having hub offices and then spoke offices, which are in more local, maybe suburban towns or small towns or villages even. So again, I think, as Helen mentioned, the only thing we know is that everything is very uncertain, but certainly at the moment there seems to be opportunities for local high streets in terms of, because people are living much more locally. I think also anecdotally there's opportunity, there's some anecdotal evidence that people are a little bit reluctant to go to shopping malls because of the health and the, having to wear a mask all the time. I mean, perhaps as people get more used to wearing masks, more that will dissipate. But certainly, there's anecdotal evidence that people are more attracted to open type of streets where you can at least take off your mask in between going to shops. This is probably a shorter term thing. But again, there is that opportunity. I'm just going to focus a little bit on transport in terms of just talking about digital, because in my work in smart cities, transport is one of the leading, is probably the leading city system in terms of its use of digital and its use of data. So where transport goes, others will follow potentially. But from our study, again, short term, a reduction in the use of public transport, and therefore a need to accommodate people in different ways. Remote working is part of the solution to that, reduction in capacity of public transport, but also other mobility, options, such as active travel, such as cycling. And we're seeing lots of cities putting in taking the opportunity of reduced traffic volumes to put in temporary, possibly permanent, but build as temporary cycling infrastructure as for more active travel. The other opportunity perhaps is micro-mobility. Again, scooters, cycling on demand sort of bicycle and electric bicycles as also an opportunity potentially to enable active travel among a wider section of the population. And just quickly, I can share, by the way, if this is hard to read, I can share the report that this is based on later on if people are interested in seeing it. But I think, in terms of public transport and in terms of this wider situation, I think data is going to be increasingly important because we are uncertain, because we don't know what the future is going to hold. Although I think we do need to take the opportunity to set the future and to set a vision and to set frameworks for development. We will need more data, though, to understand where we are, but also to test and refine new and flexible implementations. So, getting data from automatic passenger counting or, Wi-Fi, having more, sensors in the right places to be able to pick up footfall counting, and just understanding how to deliver people with the seamless travel experiences that they need in order to, make people feel safer around public transport. And then I think that, there is a great potential, I think, for new mobility options, the scooters, but also, more perhaps. I mean, shared transport is now difficult, I think, given the pandemic and given people's uncertainty about that. So, so on-demand transport options are perhaps a little bit tricky. But I think giving people better data, better information about new routes, new modes, and helping them to make the best of the situation they're in, I think there's a lot of opportunity for changing people's habits and behaviours, because we've had such a shock and such a break with this pandemic, and we are going to be in an extended period of uncertainty, that I think having a vision and having a view on placemaking and what we want our towns and cities to look like is a great opportunity for councils and any of us who care about the places that we live. I'm going to finish there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lane. That was excellent. Presentation really interesting. Okay, so I think that moves us then on to the question and answer phase, and we do have sort of about 10 minutes or so to spend on this. The technology has slightly let us down. We did get quite a few questions, but somehow I managed to delete a couple of them and we can't find them again, so my apologies for that. But I think probably some of the panel members who were kind of looking at them at the same time as I was, and hopefully have maybe picked up on some of the questions. And there were 2 or 3 questions actually around the whole issue of pedestrianising town centres, both general sense and how would that help with getting people back into our town centres, and then also there was quite a specific question, I think, Helen, as well, about sort of Derry and whether that would happen to Derry. So Paul, that's my dog. I apologise for that. Can I ask Helen, do you want to maybe take that sort of question first, just about pedestrianisation, particularly maybe with the focus of Derry?
Yeah. Okay, thanks Angus for that. Yeah, there's always an awful lot of talk about pedestrianisation, and I suppose we have to be mindful of the needs of our retailers. And I know as part of the stakeholder forum here in the city that our officials were saying yes, they would consult with the business folk, but they would also review and revise as they went along. I don't see a full pedestrianisation coming in the short term. I would, however, imagine that there may be some plans for maybe one-way traffic and taking out some parking spots and utilising part of the public realm. Maybe trials on all-day Sunday or weekends from 5 p.m. on a Friday until a Sunday afternoon. I do think that those are possibilities. I don't think they will go to full pedestrianisation at this stage, and they'll certainly be consulting with the traders as well.
Okay, Marie, what about you kind of Newry Mourne area? Would that be a similar sort of view there?
Yeah, I think, Angus, pedestrianisation, as Helen says, it's one that's been talked about for quite a considerable time. And I believe it needs to happen to a degree as well, because if you go back to when I was presenting, in this new COVID world or pandemic world, we need to create as much space as possible for people, both in shops and outside of shops, that will allow them to feel safe. I do think that there is a cultural shift needed in Northern Ireland in relation to that, because there is a perception that your retail base or your access to services, you need to be able to pull right up to the door to be able to get at that. So we do have, I think it will take time, and I think trials and I suppose shorter introductions and as Helen suggested, maybe things on a Saturday or Sunday or something that gives people the opportunity to feel that will be really, really critical. But, you know, we have so much space here. We need to go back to what is it we want the space for, and it's very much about wanting the space for people and not for vehicles. But then that means we do have to deal with vehicular access and how you get access to your towns, villages and city centres, you know. So I think there has to be a bigger, there has been talk about it for a number of years, but there definitely has to be a bigger drive in looking at more sustainable ways of travelling. I like the scooters idea, by the way, Elaine. I think that's a great idea. We talked about our boats on the canal in Newry, so there you go.
That's great. There's a kind of link to this. There's another good question here. I think it's for all of you, and I'll maybe start with you on it, Elaine. And it's basically, can the speaker suggest one key intervention, which would help entice people back into the town city centres? You're only allowed to have one.
Oh, that's very hard. I think I think the reason people come into towns and centres is to see other people to an extent. You know, I think that particularly now that we're stuck in our homes and there's, you know, various restrictions on how many people you can have in your home and etc. I think one of the reasons people now go out is actually to see other people in 3D. So I guess I think I would probably look for some kind of tactical temporary measures even to increase the amount of socialization space in the cities and towns. You know, like even benches or small or plants in pots or whatever it is, to make space, to make nice spaces for people to sit down and have a coffee and, I was going to say enjoy the weather, but you know, make the best of the weather in our, you know, where we are. So I think I would try and do something like that.
I mean, I think in order to entice people back into city centres, and cities are all about people, as Mary has rightly pointed out, we need to make sure that the safety measures are in place, that our big shopping centres and our cultural venues have got the appropriate measures, that there are those one-way systems, that they do feel comfortable coming into the city. And some of the measures that we're talking about, you know, the one-way systems, extending out the shops, putting in the awnings and the covered streets to allow that social distancing to take place. I think those type of measures will actively encourage people and who are fearful and allow them to enjoy the city centre again. But there are a number of measures to be put in place to give them the confidence to come back into city centres.
Thanks, Helen. Marie?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with both Lynn and Helen. You know, I think it's very much about safe and open space. It's creating social space. I would say on a personal level, I thought I was going to go stir crazy in the house. You know, we're sociable beings, and the only place we have to socialise now is literally when you maybe go to the butcher's on a Saturday to pick up your shopping, or go to the shops to pick up whatever it happens to be. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I can tell you when you're standing in those socially distanced queues, the amount of people I got talking to over the last 6 months has been unreal. So space that will allow people to engage with people, I think, is absolutely critical. I think it's really important from a mental health and wellbeing perspective as well, not just an economic perspective.
Thanks. Okay. Hopefully everybody can still hear me here, because I seem to have frozen on the screen. But there's quite a few questions just about changes to travel patterns and travel behaviour there. So maybe just one again. Maybe I'll start with Elaine on this one. How important do you think that is to the recovery and to particularly to town city centres, moving away from the car-based approach maybe that we've had in the past and focusing more on sustainable modes of transport?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, that was an existing trend before the pandemic, was the increasing importance of sustainable travel and the emphasis that governments were starting to plan, city governments were starting to place on sustainable travel. And I think it's even more important now because of we just don't have the space on the roads for everyone who might want to drive. So we have to make it possible for people who can use active travel modes, and I see there's a question about older and disabled people. We have to make it possible for people who can and want to use active travel modes, but were maybe discouraged in the past, to be able to do that safely. And I think that's and give people a choice of getting around that isn't just dependent on the car. And I think the benefits of opening up, of making more space available for cycling and walking, is that you then potentially reduce the dependency of children. For example, kids can go to school perhaps on their own if they're depending on where they are. And there's also older people. It's safer for them also to perhaps travel around on their own. But at least it takes people who don't have to use a car off the road, and then leaves that space for people who maybe need their car more. So I think that's certainly in the city governments that we're working with in Europe and globally, that is an increasing
Okay, folks, I think actually that takes us more or less to the end of the session. I think the broadband is beginning to let us down. I'm not sure. I seem to have frozen, so is Lane. So hopefully everyone is still hearing me. But maybe if I just bring things to a close, and can I thank all of the speakers today. Really, on behalf of the RTPI, very grateful for the presentations. Thought they were all very interesting, very stimulating, and really on message about really one of the big issues I think that faces us in Northern Ireland today. So thank you so much, and thank the delegates as well for the questions. I think the questions were very good. And also like to thank the sponsors for the conference, Landmark Chambers and Arup as well. So thank you all very much, and I think that brings the session to a close. Thank you.